Welcome to the second part of a story of Rose Lubin talking about a tragic loss, one of the saddest losses around the world, an American citizen who was serving in the IDF as a lone soldier and unfortunately lost her life to a victim of terror. She was a powerhouse. She stood up for herself at 8 years old against people who were talking anti-Semitic remarks. She was a wrestling superstar. She decided to take on the world and was way beyond her years. On the first part, we spoke to Robin, Rosie's mother. I call her Rosie because she's my friend, and she's now etched into my DNA for my life and my kids' lives and my grandkids' lives. But we spoke to Robin, and now we're hearing the perspective from Rosie's father, David, from Georgia, talking about how they're honoring their family and Rose's life, and how they're so resilient and able to move forward instead of many families who have lost lives that are sitting back on the side and not talking about it, which we completely understand and respect. David and Robin are speaking up, and we really appreciate you coming on, David. We really appreciate what you're doing. We know that you're doing some legislative changes and pushing things forward, but we want to hear a little bit about your background, where you got this resilience, and then how you instilled that on your daughter, and how you can talk to our viewers about how they can parent in such an incredible way that you have parented your daughter. So, David, thanks for coming.
You're welcome, and thank you all for having us, for having Robin here yesterday and me today to talk about Rose. So the question of like how did this all come together in Rose's life? A little bit of my background: we grew up in Arkansas, and then I moved to Memphis, Tennessee, when I was about 9. It was a small town in Arkansas that we lived in, and usually, in Arkansas, we were the only Jewish family there. And I think that growing up in environments like that, I learned how to really understand my Judaism, how important it was to be Jewish, because we didn't hide. We didn't hide who we were. We were very clear with people that we were the Jewish family. And people had respect for that. And I think sometimes, just in today, a lot of people, we kind of hide who we are because we think that people won't respect it. But people do. I think the more Jewish we are and the more outspoken about who we are, as long as we're good people and we live our lives that way, then people genuinely respect that in this country. So I think that's kind of what I brought to the table with Rose, is that clear identity of who we were, and that you couldn't be anyone else. I taught her never to hide her Jewish identity, and she understood that from a very young age. I've mentioned before that we talked about the past, the Jewish past, that we were a persecuted people, and that it was important that she understood that, and that she really understood like the Holocaust. In fact, sometimes, from parenting, you try to like hide things from your kids. I was very much like, y'all have to understand everything about the Holocaust. You need to understand, the horrific events that occurred at a very young age. In fact, in our house, we boycott products. My kids will always come home and be like, can I wear these shoes? And I'll say, let me do some research. And usually we find out that there's a connection to a German company that, my kids can't, like, for example, they don't eat Krispy Kreme donuts anymore because Krispy Kreme is owned by a company that's a conglomerate, that 25% of the company is owned by a family that profited from Jewish labor, and they never did reparations. So you can dig into that later, but that's the life that I grew them up with.
My mother would never buy a Mercedes car. She absolutely refused to ever want to buy a Mercedes.
Yeah, we don't have Mercedes, and for a moment we had a Ford, and then I got rid of it very quickly. So, they grew up understanding that. So the combination of that and taking Rose and all of our children to Israel on a almost on a yearly basis throughout their childhood has added the backdrop for what Rose, I think, became in her love of Israel.
Did you have obviously she was deciding she loves Israel. What made her go to the army? Because there's a lot of people that love Israel that will go and work that will go there for a year or will be there. I mean, going to the army, you have to be a pretty extreme person. How was that? I know she wanted to go when she was started at 8 years old, but how did those conversations go? Was that something that you said to her, that is something that we want you to do? How did those conversations go?
We supported it. We never told her no. We were and I think that was because we understood where it was coming from. It wasn't coming. It was coming from a very genuine, real love of Israel, and we could see in her desire to defend the Jewish people, to protect the Jewish people, that it wasn't just a fad or something that was like, the hair color of the week. This was real, and she studied it, and she learned it, and she wanted to learn Hebrew, and she wanted to visit, and she wanted to be a part of Israel. It was in her, and we saw that, so we supported it. We were worried. Don't get me wrong. We were definitely worried about the fact of her going and picking up a gun and protecting Israel, because we knew that it could end in her losing her life.
Yeah, it's so unfortunate. I remember I had friends of mine that came from the States and went into the Army, and it's such a rigorous time that when you're going there and you're really by yourself, and you don't really have you don't have family around you, and some people, we had a friend of ours from Chicago, a friend of mine from Chicago, actually commit suicide during that time, because of the challenges of what it really means to be alone. But it didn't seem like she was ever alone. It sounded like you have a lot of family there. You're very Zionistic. And we heard a little bit about her, like some of her passages, talking about how she felt so proud to be a Jew and so proud to be in Israel. But a lot of people are creating this separation. There's Zionism, there's Israel, and there's the Jewish community. But she didn't feel that way.
No, and it's interesting that you say that, because this morning I was talking with one of our senators here in Georgia, and we were discussing the fact that you really, in America, there's like this, you can hate Israel, but you can still love Jews. And that I was talking to them, that never really was the case, but we made this excuse as Americans. And that time has ended now. We no longer can do that. You can't hate Israel and love Jews. And I think the Jewish people in America have got to open up their eyes to that. And I think that when they look out on the streets and they see the people waving the Palestinian flags, they're waving that against Jews. They're not just waving that against Israel's. And we should not be, blinded to that fact.
Yeah, why are they waving flags at Hanukkah events why are they at every Israeli embassy or every Israeli restaurant? Why are they coming after? Why are they going to kosher restaurants or going to the Hillel house? These have nothing to do with, if you broke it down and put a delineation between the two, they really don't have anything to do with each other. So it's very clear. We had an amazing guest. He's a leading expert on Middle East affairs and especially in terrorism, and he was talking about how many of the Muslim Brotherhood factions are now actually here in the U.S. and that they've infiltrated and they're manipulating the society and manipulating the young people and pushing them, and they're protesting. It's basically Hamas is protesting next to Americans that they've brainwashed that Jews are bad, and it's creating this new scapegoat. There's a lot of families that I know that and my father knows, and we've spoken to them, that have lost lives of their family, but many of the times they don't want to speak up. Why are you speaking up?
Let me hit on one other point real quick of what you just said, if you don't mind. When you talk about raising your children, okay, and going to what we're talking about, like young children and how they're brainwashed, right? So as a parent, I always made sure that if Rose or any of my children are involved in anything that is outside of, school or even in school, I'll do the research. Like, for example, Black Lives Matters. Okay. That was the thing. Rose came home one day and she's like, I'm going to a Black Lives Matter event. And then my wife's like, well, I'm giving money to Black Lives Matter. And I'm like, have y'all researched what Black Lives Matter really is? Have you paid close attention? And they had not. It was just what they were doing. Meanwhile, I started going, Rose, you need to look it up. She looked it up, and then she took the poster and she tore up the poster, because those organizations do a very good job of infiltrating and getting into the minds of Jewish Americans and Americans altogether. And it's the thing to do. But meanwhile, there's a lot of anti-Semitism in that organization. It became very clear when they attacked synagogues, when they were rioting. It became very clear if you read their corporate dialogue of what they are. It says it there. But we don't dig deep enough as parents. And as Jewish parents, we have an obligation to do that, to protect our children and to protect the Jewish people. So I'm sorry. I just wanted to add that to what you
said.
I love that's super important, and that's a real problem that people don't take the next step. But that was part of the podcast we had this morning. Think for yourself, independent, question. That's something that we always taught our kids. Also, don't just accept and move on. You got to think about what it means and go deeper and think about really what you want to do and what you want to accomplish in a meaningful way.
So I think that answers your question of why are we speaking out now? Because of where we're at. I trust me, I would have not loved, if Rose had died and we weren't in a war and anti-Semitism wasn't at the highest point we've seen in the history of this country. I probably would have just grieved as a father and been at home. But there is a need for our family to step up, because what Rose signifies to a lot of people is a message, and also an idea that we just can't sit on the sidelines. We have to take action to protect Israel. And when times get hard, because she didn't go there when there was a war, she went there when it was easier. But when it got hard on October 7th, she grabbed her gun to go fight. When she went back to work and she knew they were shutting down the Muslim quarter and she became a target that eventually led to her death, she didn't go and hide. She didn't take days off. She didn't ask for a moment. She wanted to be there to fight and protect the Jewish people. So as her father, knowing where we are in this country and where we are in this world, I can't sit idly by while that's happening, when the message of her can go out and can help direct Jewish people to take a critical stand at a time where we need critical
It sounds
stands.
From what we heard yesterday from Rose's mother that Rose was at the forefront of everything. When she was 8 years old, she was pushing down the bullies and standing up to them. And now I think we see clearly where it came from.
Beating up the bullies and them crying with their mommies knocking on the door.
Looking for an apology.
And Robin having to answer and going, oh, again?
Your daughter hurt me.
that definitely was... We were scratching our heads at those moments, but you don't know, you're kind of like, you almost want to look at those parents and go, man, you need to toughen up your boys. Come on.
You're sort of, Rose, you really have to apologize with your hands snickering behind you.
Your kid lost fair and square. That's on you.
Yeah, it's a good life lesson for your kid. You should thank us.
Everyone's smiling. Yeah, we're really sorry. Big smiles.
Yeah, exactly.
For everybody.
My daughter beat up your son. I don't.
My 8-year-old daughter beat up your 12-year-old son.
And we're not known for our height. Just FYI.
No, we're not.
That's okay. You're doing some. It sounds like. I mean, what I love what you're saying is that you're encouraging parents, number one, to ask questions, and number two is to take a stand for what you truly believe in. What are you telling now? You're talking to senators. You're now this icon. What is the next chapter of Rose's story and Rose's life? What is the next chapter that you're taking with her, and that she's going to live on, because you guys are not quitters? So what is the next chapter in Rose's life being lived through you and your family?
Well, I think here in Georgia, we've been meeting with politicians trying to really push. It's Bill 30 that's in the Georgia Senate to turn anti-Semitism into a hate crime. But it also includes in that hate crime that Israel is included. So that's very important for us here in Georgia. Then on a national level, we've been talking to senators, our senator and our House representative. We plan on going to Washington for them to honor Rose. And the way what we see coming out of that is that we make politicians see us. I turned on the news the other day and you saw, Palestinian protesters in the Senate halls sitting on the floor and having to be dragged out. Well, what better image than a family coming in there with a war hero from Israel who was an all-American girl who stood up against that. And we'll come in there and we'll smile and we'll present a much different image than what is presented on the other side. And if anyone reads Rose's story, they realize that this was an amazing, amazing woman that stood for more than just her heroism in Israel. She stood for all things that are good, that all of us should strive to be. And that image of her, I know helps the Jewish people as well as
Absolutely.
Israel.
And what was that image? What were the things that she stood for?
Wow. Well, one of the most amazing characteristics she had that I think really drove her was, her love of Hashem, but also that she didn't speak Lashon Hara. I don't know if Robin went through this with you yesterday and talked about that.
But continue.
But no, she really did not. And I mentioned that in her eulogy. And when I said it, when I wrote it, I knew that what I was saying was the truth. And when I said it, there was a moment that I was kind of like, I know people are going to hear this and they're going to say, she didn't speak Lashon Hara. Okay. Yeah, right. We all speak Lashon Hara, So I came back to Atlanta and I was sitting, actually I was during the Shloshim, so I was davening every day. And I went to shul and a rabbi that I'd known for a long time pulled me aside. He said, David, you said something in your eulogy about your daughter that I heard that I want to talk to you about. I'm like, oh, what was it? He said, you said she didn't speak Lashon Hara. And I said, yes, she did. And he goes, well, I want to tell you something. I've heard people say that, but when you said it about her, I knew that it was true. And I was like, okay, how did you know that? He goes, I'm going to tell you a story I never told you. When your daughter was 4 years old, she was in preschool with my daughter at Congregation Beth Jacob here in Atlanta. And my daughter came home one day and she was very, very upset. And he said to her, why are you upset? And she said, there's a girl in the school who's very upset with us. She's never coming back to school again. And she's like, well, why is she not coming back? And the daughter says, because we were speaking Lashon Hara. And he said, who's this girl? And of course, it was Rose Lubin. So no, that's, and then I found a letter that I wrote to her at her bat mitzvah when she was 12. And in the letter, at the end of the letter, I read, I wrote to her, Rose, thank you for guiding me not to speak Lashon Hara. And then we heard from girls at her camp that said, whenever girls were speaking about other girls, Rose would just leave the room. And they never understood why she would disappear. And then finally, one of the girls said, she went up and said, Rose, why do you always kind of just walk away from us whenever we're talking? She said, I don't want to offend y'all, but y'all are speaking Lashon Hara and I don't want to be a part of it. And so there were all these gradual steps on how she lived her life that were just, it tells you who she was and the way that she lived her life. I think those stories.
It tells us who you are, and to enable Lashon Hara is the Jewish form of gossip. It's basically as bad as killing somebody. That's how we view it in terms of punishments, because everything's a punishment in Judaism. We always have something, but in general, it's one of the hardest sins to overcome, and to actually overcome it shows tremendous resilience. And I think that for our listeners out there, if you can take on, and you can call it Rose's mitzvah, to honor Rose's life, is to take on not speaking Lashon Hara, or taking one step of maybe saying, hey, let's not talk gossip about that person. Let's not talk gossip. And something
or to walk away like Rose did. Follow Rose's example and don't say anything if you think you can't, and just walk away.
And Rose was a leader. And that's something that we heard from Robin, is Rose was a leader. And this is to honor her life. This is something that we're going to take on ourselves. My dad and I will commit to that, and something that our listeners also will commit to. Now that you're fighting on the Senate floor, so you're trying to create anti-Semitism, more awareness for anti-Semitism, more awareness for people standing up for Jews standing up for themselves. What is the next stage? So you're going on the state level, you're going now on a national level. What's the next stage that you're going for? What's the goal for you?
The goal for us is that I think we have to back up at some point and start realizing where the money's coming from. And I don't think we've talked about where the money's coming from that's funding the anti-Semitism in this country. Because if you start to, and I've started to look at it, and I don't know if you've ever heard of RFB. Have you? The Rockefeller Brothers Foundation?
No.
So you should do some research into the Rockefeller Brothers Foundation. They have given millions of dollars to, and this is the Rockefeller family, by the way. This is their foundation. They're giving money to anti-Semitic organizations, and even some that have been terrorist organizations. They're a big supporter of the organizations that want to boycott Israel. And they're just one of the big funders of what's happening. But there's people out there that have an agenda that we as Jews need to start looking into. They always say follow the money, right? I mean, and I don't think any of us have really started doing that, but I've started doing that, and I think that we've got to dig deeper and find out who's backing these people that are waving these flags, who's backing the organizations that are spreading all this anti-Semitism. There is money behind that, and I think we'll be very surprised when we find out who these people are because they have an agenda. And for example, the Rockefeller agenda, with a big part of what they're trying to do is to boycott Israel.
It's interesting because, as Aaron referred, an earlier guest that we had on the podcast talked about all the different groups in the United States that are powerful and backed by, I think it was the Brotherhood of Islam, and that
the Islamic Brotherhood, the Muslim Brotherhood,
the Muslim Brotherhood, and that's really the umbrella organization of Hamas and all of the other groups. I can't remember the names of it that he mentioned, 4 or 5 different organizations that have come from there and are financed from there, and we know where the ultimate finance is coming from. But yes, and he's saying, and his message to us was that the Jews in the United States and around the world have to unite as one and fight exactly what you're saying.
Yes, it's there. But there are American companies that are backing this, that are out there, and there's families that are American families that are backing this, and that have an agenda to get into mainstream America as well as get into mainstream politics and make changes that will undermine Israel, which eventually will undermine American Jews.
Of course, there's always going to be good versus evil, and evil is not just a little section in the world. There's always going to be the two battles, and as long as the good unite, then we can overcome the evil. The only way to get over darkness is to shine a light and make sure that your light is constantly getting brighter and brighter, because the darkness is going to get stronger and stronger. So what we're hoping for is these large Jewish organizations to get closer and closer and work together as one, which is, I think they're starting to realize that they have to really coordinate and start working together for them to actually take some action. The goal, Israel and the Jewish people have never really developed a narrative before. They really haven't developed a branding story that talks about who we are instead of being vilified and being looked at as villains. And as long as, if we come together and create this narrative that we are good and we are just, and I was talking to a friend of mine, he's the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, and we're talking, and I said, and he's like, how come you're so outspoken? And I said, because the world lost 6 million lives in the Holocaust and another million in Russia. And because they didn't target Jews, no one cares about the last million in Russia. And then they don't, and it's still not enough for the world to realize that we are not bad people, and we're actually good people, and we're peace-loving people. And I think that the mainstream and the people with normal sense are seeing the Jews are actually, we're just loving people. We work really hard. We put really tough challenges on ourselves. We like to push ourselves past our limits because we view sky's the limit, and we're enabled by our parents, which is something that you've done for your daughter. After the Army, what was she going to do? What was she going to take on?
So Rose's, back up. Rose, when she died, she kind of left us a very good roadmap for who she was and what she wanted. And one of those things that she made it clear to us, that she was very interested in helping religious girls in Israel be able to serve in the army. And because what she saw is that, she didn't wear, she would have been wearing a skirt, as opposed to the pants sometimes. And she felt like the girls that wanted to dress sneas, that they couldn't feel comfortable in the army, or that if they were going to keep kosher, that it would be difficult for them in some cases, or if they were going to want to do certain mitzvahs, or they needed to daven, that they felt they weren't going to have that opportunity in the army. So she was really wanting to get connected with young girls and work with them to show them that there was a place physically, and as well as, physically being fit to join the army as well. So I actually reached out this morning, and we were talking to an organization there called Aluma, and they actually do that exact thing. They work with young girls that are in schools to help them see that there's a path forward if they want to. And they may not want to. It may be that they don't want to, but they want them to have that opportunity to know that it is something they can do.
That's her nonprofit. What was she going to do? Is she going to be a CEO of Fortune 500 company? I love that. That's an unbelievable organization, because there are a lot of women that want to stand up and they want to say something. And equal rights, I view the equal rights movement for women. It's not equal rights on equal pay. It should be, which I do agree with, but it should be equal across the board. If you want to serve in the Army, serve in the Army. If you want to be a fighter in the Army, Karkal has a incredible fighting force right in the Army. I remember I saw them. I was like, these are tough girls. Like, I'm not messing with these girls. I'll talk to the American girls. They're much softer for me. I don't want to be in a war zone in my own house. But what was her next page? So if one thing on the nonprofit sector, that was something she was passionate about. But what about on the profit sector?
She wanted to work in psychology, but with the fitness aspect of it. Mm-hmm. She wanted to know how to. She was very much into fitness and eating and living a healthy life. So she wanted to work with people that needed help, exercising, but she wanted to also bring in the psychological side of that as well. But Rose was never looking to make money. That was the thing. What was another, she wasn't driven by money or materialism. She was completely driven by giving back to people and helping them. In fact, when she left, she left home. She would not take money from either me or Robin. And her main goal was to be on her own and to be able to take care of herself. And 3 weeks ago, she sent me a text that said, "Dad, I met my financial goal." So, I mean, which was incredible. I mean, her financial goal was to save this a certain amount of money, not to have to call me for a dime, which I would have gladly given to her. But, looking back on it, when she died,
let them know about that.
That's between you guys, okay? But yeah, she left home and went to Israel. Never, we tried to give her money and she wouldn't take it. But, when you talk about someone living a life, and I think it's important you talk about this, in her life, she accomplished so much of those things. And that the fact that she found financial stability and met her financial goal. How many of us really can, I've thought I've made my financial goal, but there's always another one that I set for myself, so she made that. And then
So our podcast is Resilient Riches. So we talk about money a lot. And I love that you brought this financial goal up, because when I was in the Army, my financial goal, so I owned some Cisco stock back then, and I don't recommend it. All the compliance people, it's not something I recommend. I'm just saying I owned it. I'm a financial advisor. I'm not your financial advisor, but I own Cisco stock. I don't know why I bought it. It was I saw it online. Someone said it'd be a good stock. So I bought it. And then I sold it, and I was able to travel for 4.5 months across Europe and Asia by myself. I never asked my parents for $1, and if I did ask, the wire would come back empty because there was no money.
We sent you some money.
No,
How about that time when you ended up in Germany and you gave away all your money in Israel? Family.
I gave away all my cash to a family in Israel, in the north of Israel, to help build their house. And then my parents sent me money, but then they reimbursed themselves immediately from my American bank account. So you sent me money, but it was
I recall that happening.
I watch every dollar. I recall, but I love what you're saying. That for young women and for young people, even setting financial goals at a very early stage will actually give you that autonomy and will give confidence that you can then accomplish whatever you want. If money is not your goal, that's fine. But having financial freedom is really important. It doesn't have to be what part of your life is. Your goal in life is not to build money or to build wealth. That's okay. But having financial freedom is such a core backbone to give yourself the ability to go out and do whatever you want to do. You want to go to the Army? We support that. You want to give back. You want to be a psychologist, whatever it is. You want to go and lobby in Congress and get people to say, hey, Jews are good people. Great. And I love that she set those financial goals, and I'm really happy that she met them.
But as you said, and it applies to everybody, when you have that financial freedom and you've done it for yourself and you've looked after your financial goals and you don't have to, you're not operating a deficit, whatever stage of life you are, it gives a certain sense of accomplishment and and confidence to you that you can accomplish anything that you want to do. And that sounds like that was what Rose was all about. She put her mind to something, she did it.
And
Yeah, no, completely. And, probably, and I got that text from her that was like, Dad, I met my financial goal with a smiley face. It was, it felt good. It felt good for me. And I know that it felt good for her because she, you're right. It also gave her this sense of pride, that she did this and that she was able to care for herself and take care of who she was.
It's something that's really really powerful. Your background, where did you get this resilience from you? I mean, it clearly came from somewhere.
I think from both of my parents. They both raised me with a very, very strong work ethic, and we were always taught to take action and to not just sit around and wait for things to happen for us, and to be confident in who we were. Those are how they guided us as parents. I mean, my father, I remember as a kid, they all tried different businesses, and if you talk about money, they both had major financial problems, and they both went through a downtime, but they kept working every single day as hard as they could. But also, they were there for their family. There was never this trade-off either. They didn't trade off the family for the work. They figured out a way to combine them both together, so that we all stayed strong.
You have a great example of somebody like that on this podcast right now. My dad is the epitome of that. It was nice when he went away for 3-4 days because he was a yeller, but in general, he was the epitome of show up every day, bust your ass, do everything you can. David, is there anything that you want our listeners to know? Something, and one thing, sorry, before I ask that question, we'll be donating to the charity, Rose's charity in Israel, just to help women get empowered, and if they want to go to the army and to get into shape and to build that confidence. So we'll be donating personally to that charity. We also donate to the synagogue in Atlanta, just to help, and because I know how important that was. So we'll be doing both sides.
The Sefer Torah, Aaron. Sefer Torah,
and one thing also, we're doing a Sefer Torah. I felt on October 7th, and not to make this about me, I felt on October 7th, and we need to do action. We're doers. We need to step up and do something. So me and I rallied 2 of my friends, and then we started a Torah in Israel that's being written. And at the end of the year, it's going to be finished around the anniversary of the massacre on October 7th. And it'll be finished by Be'eri or one of the kibbutzim. And we've had people on the podcast from there. And then we'll bring it back to New York to finish it and have the largest Torah dedication in Manhattan history, connecting the Jews to Be'eri from New York, because there'll be a lot of tours that are going to be left there, and it's beautiful, but we need to have connectivity, and we need to show New York and the Jews here in America need to be a part of this, and that's how we're going to connect them. We'd love to invite you and fly you out to New York to come for the celebration, and to honor her life, and we'll be mentioning her in that as well. Anything that you want to tell our listeners, anything that you want to tell whoever you can.
Well, I just wondered, did Robin talk to you guys about what she did on October 7th?
No.
I don't know if she filled you. So Rose's, and I think a lot of people may not know what she did that day. She lived on Kibbutz Sa'ad, which was attacked. I don't know if y'all know that or not.
Continue.
She did mention, she didn't talk about that day, October 7th. Robin didn't talk about it.
Yeah, so if you're talking about October 7th, Rose lived on Kibbutz Sa'ad, which was right on the Gaza border, and she was there on Simchas Torah. So when the kibbutz was attacked, we got a call from Rose. I guess it was at right when the bombs started coming in, when they were shooting the rockets, and she said that she was in the bomb shelter and she was safe. And it was like 1:30 in the morning here, so we were all asleep. We got a call back, I guess, and she was calling Robin at that time. She called her back. It was about a few hours later and said, "Mom, I've got my gun and I've got my uniform and I'm going to guard the gate." And none of us knew what that meant. It was about 9 o'clock in the morning when I realized that they were under attack because it was Simchas Torah and we were celebrating the holiday. We later that day, I called Rose, and she after everything had settled down that evening, and she explained, she was actually kind of laughing, I think, because it's like, Dad, I was in a war. I was just in a major war, and I was like, okay, are you okay? You're safe? She's like, yeah, I'm safe. She's like, my commander's coming to get me tomorrow. He's picking me up to bring me back to Jerusalem to work. And, we just kind of talked for a moment. I realized that I didn't need to delve into what happened because, she'd just been in a war. I didn't want to know all the details, and I didn't want her to have to relive the details. The next day, I called her after her commander picked her up, and she wasn't laughing anymore. She was actually almost about to cry. And I said, Rose, what happened? Why are you, what's brought you to this point? You were laughing yesterday. She said, Dad, I'd been behind the gate fighting all day. And I finally came out today when my commander picked me up, and I saw all the destruction and death that was on the road of what Hamas had done to the area that I lived in that I loved. And I talked to her and I said, Rose, you're going back to work now, and they need you in Jerusalem, and you're going to have to guard, at the old city, and you need to put all that behind you. I hate to tell you, but you got to compartmentalize that because you're going to have to go back to work. And I'm like, you're a soldier. And she got it, and she went back to work. About 2 weeks after this, I got a phone call from my sister, and she said she was in Los Angeles at an event, and she said, I got in a car with somebody. It was a Jewish event. I think it was for FIDF, and they were in a car, and the woman next to her was talking about this girl from Atlanta that was a hero on a kibbutz in Israel. And she's like, who are you talking about? And she said, oh, Hero Rose. Have you heard about this girl who moved a gate that let all the people come into this kibbutz for safety on October 7th? And it was a gate that took 3 men to move, and this one little girl did it. And she's Hero Rose. And my sister's like, Hero, what are you talking about? Hero, that's Rose Lubin. That's my niece. And she's like, oh, wow. And so my sister calls me up. She tells me this, and I get on the phone and I call Rose. I'm like, Rose, they're calling you Hero Rose in Atlanta. What happened with this gate? And she said, Dad, I'm never coming back to Atlanta again. I said, they're calling you that. I said, I have T-shirts made, Rose, Hero Rose. And she said, I'm never coming back to America then.
That's amazing.
But so she then told me, she's like, yes, Dad, there was a gate, and all the people from that Nova festival who were running from there came to where she was at, and she's the one who brought hundreds of them to safety through this gate while she said there was, gunfire all around her. So that's all. And then at that point, I left it at that. I didn't want to push any deeper. Well, the story continues. When we were sitting Shiva, the second day I'm in the Shiva, we're in a tent, and a man comes in. I say it's a man. He's 20 years old. He comes in. Looks like he just ran out of war because he's in his uniform. He's dirty, and he doesn't speak English, but he's trying to tell me something. So someone comes over, and they start to translate what he's saying in Hebrew. And what he's telling me is that he saw that my daughter had died. He was a paratrooper who was in that area when the war started happening. He ran to Kibbutz Sa'ad because he knew they weren't under attack. He came into contact with Rose at the gate, and he needed to land helicopters. He was trying to tell her, we need to land helicopters. Can you help? And she said, yes. She then went with him and directed him to where the helipad was there. Again, while bullets are flying around them, he told me, and brought him to that area and helped him bring in the first helicopters that had to come into that area that needed a safe place. And he said that he could have never done it without her, and that he couldn't believe she was dead, and he was crying, and just, he was hugging me, and then he left. And I kind of put that in the back of my head, like, what, Rose, what did you do? The next day a man comes into me, and he's an older gentleman. He's crying, and he doesn't speak English. They translate. He's telling me that Rose, those helicopters that she brought in, the first 50 people saved his entire village and his entire family, and that he owes his life and his children, his grandchildren's life to Rose. The third day we're sitting there, a man comes in it turns out actually to be her boyfriend that we didn't even know about. And he's like, I was there with Rose, and I was supposed to learn about him being the boyfriend, but not this way. Robin already knew, but I didn't know. He tells us that Rose physically knocked him down because she saw Hamas and he was sitting there. He was facing the other direction. She tackled him when the bullets came and saved his life. So we're sitting there going, Rose, I think when you hear these stories, you realize just what a heroine she really was.
It's amazing. I mean, the stories that come out afterwards and the honor that she had, you don't realize a small little thing. Okay, she opened the gate. You don't even think about it. Then you save these lives and you build and you grow. I mean, it's stories that are that only you heard from in the Holocaust, and that people are doing them now. That the for example, the Bielski family, how they were able to save people in the forest, and they saved the Kushners, they saved some of the most successful and most powerful Jews in the world that now are helping other Jews, and the ripple effect of that. Those people will have the ripple effect. They will live Rose's life, and they will do exactly what she did for others, and they'll pay it forward, and it'll be an exponential. We always say that if you save a life, or if you save one life, it's like saving a million, and she saved 50 million lives.
Yeah.
But knowing Rose, like just knowing Rose through Robin and what you're saying, it seems to me that it was just like it came totally natural to her. Like for her, that was like her a natural response or automatic reaction. You jump in and you save and you do and you help and you do whatever she can. And that just sounds like what Rose was all about and what happened over there.
Yeah, it was, her boyfriend came and told me, he's like, I came to see her that morning and I told her not to come because I came to check on her. But when he came in there, he said she already had her gun, had her uniform on. And he's like, you can't go out, and she smiled at him and said, what do you mean I can't go out? This is my kibbutz and I'm going to protect it. So, I mean, and he said she did it with like a smile and like the smirk of like, what do you, my job, I mean, her job every day in Magav was to guard, the toughest place in the world. Yeah. I mean, we think about where we're put in life, we're put in certain positions. And I look back on it and I realize that all the training that she had to be a Magav soldier was a combat soldier, right? And all of her training that where she was working in the old city at that gate was to protect that gate and protect all the Jews behind it. Where did she find herself on October 7th? She found herself in combat and guarding a gate again. There's a reason that everything happens. And I think sometimes we don't see it till afterwards. And there was a reason that she had all that. There's a reason she was in Israel. There's a reason she was there on October 7th. And that she had that type of training.
And there's a reason that Dovey and I wrestled together and 15 years ago in high school, and that me and him were speaking, and I actually wrestled Dovey's brother, I think Akiva, and that put everybody. I beat him in my senior year, and then put us everybody together, and then this is how this happened, and then you never know what the impact we're going to get. I was on Fox a little while ago. I'm still getting messages from people in Ireland that are Muslim Americans, that are just people who are texting me, messaging me on LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook. We're so thankful. We're so appreciative. All this stuff. Like, I feel so alone. I'm so scared to be a Jew because they know, like, what should I do? All this stuff. And it's really amazing. The impact that one action can take in the world for the families that are grieving, for their lost lives. And now we're about 100, 105, I think 110 lives that have been tragically lost since the war, and the families that lost the 12 to 1,300 people that have passed. What do you say to them?
We know how they feel. I mean, it's you feel like a part of your life has been taken from you. There's levels of grief that you have in these moments, and there's nothing I can say to anybody, and I can say to myself to make it any better. So there, when people say there's no words, there are no words.
You're not alone.
Yeah, they're not alone. That is something I can say, is that talk to other parents. What has helped me is that we've reached out to other parents in Israel that have gone through similar, losses, and speaking to them, especially people that lost children in the Lebanon war. Okay. Cause they're 25 years into this. and they can give you a guide on how it's going to be and where you could end up, and that life doesn't have to end. It's almost like you have to restart, and that is kind of the way that our family we're looking at, is that we're beginning again. A woman who lost her child, her name is Debbie, and she said that she made a good point of talking about Adam and Eve. If you go back, they lost their son. But what did they do? They started over again. It's almost like, from a religious standpoint, the Torah kind of gives us a guidebook, and sometimes we don't think about it. Like first couple that we know lost a child, right? But did they end? Did they just stop? No, we kept going, and it's something to learn from.
Something deep, and we cannot thank you enough for coming on. We can't thank you enough for doing what you're doing, stepping up, taking action, showing your resilience, taking a leadership role, and sharing us a part of Rose's life. And Rosie's my friend, so Rosie's life, and giving us a little piece of the honor that you had to have a daughter like you did. And I feel that with my kids. I feel honored to be their parent. My dad feels that with his kids, that he feels an honor to be part of that. And we feel honored that you allowed us to open this story and to talk about it. And we really appreciate you. We love you. We care about you. We care about your daughter, the rest of your family, Robin, your community. Well, it's amazing, and we can't thank you enough.
Well, Dad and Yair, thank you both. I appreciate it. And, I'm Yisrael Chai, and hopefully this war will end very, very soon.
And hopefully we finish this
and
we
take care in a winning way, in a successfully way.
And yes, that's how to build. Thanks everybody for listening. We'll see you on the next one. Goodbye for now.